Welcome to our Fireside Chat at the Brooklyn. And welcome to our Fireside Chat that the Brooklyn NAACP is hosting. So we are so glad to see parents, students, educators, family members, community members, elected officials, and other NAACP members. A specific thank you to the Brownsville Community Culinary Center for giving us the use of this. This is our second Fireside Chat, and we wish to communicate the needs of the African Americans and people of color, as well as organizing African Americans and people of color. We wish to develop the community voice to add to the Brooklyn NAACP's legislative agenda for education. And we feel that here in this setting, that can be accomplished. This afternoon, we're going to discuss the school's family involvement, health and wellness, and student voice. Some of the issues we anticipate discussing are ways to increase community involvement, celebrate health and wellness in the community, and ways to access those resources for our community members and school staff. And we also like to increase student voice. There are a few specific questions that other members of the committee would like to see addressed. And they are, what actions are African, diasporic, and Latinx people prepared to do to fix their education system? How might our actions be seen as a radical behavior? How can we operate in a space of trust, yet be radical? How do we effectively engage families in designing school events, such as having students design flyers, even host events? How do we encourage school staff to understand that families who can't be physically present does not equate to them not being interested in what's going on in a family school? And what does effective health and wellness look like in our schools? So, in front of you, you'll find index cards and pencils, and we encourage you to use them to write down your thoughts or questions that you might have that we can pose to the panel. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Eric Adams, Brooklyn Borough President. Rajendra Maharaj, who is the Brooklyn NAACP third Vice President and the Chair of the Equity in Arts and Culture Committee. We have Ms. Angel Austin, the New York City Deputy Chancellor of Education. And we have Dr. Miatheresa, Pate, Superintendent of Community School District 23. My name is Karlene Felix. I have Karima. We're co-facilitators for this. And finally, but last but not least, we have Tracy Gray, who is the chair of the Brooklyn NAACP Education Committee. She is also
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon.
I appreciate everyone taking time, making time to be a part of this important conversation. Looks like we have some young people here. We want to make sure that your voices are amplified in our conversation. Before we begin the actual conversation, we would like to hear from our panelists, and we're waiting for two other panelists to arrive. We're waiting for our Brooklyn NAACP President, Eljoy Williams, who is on her way, and Councilmember Robert Cornegy, who is also on his way. Panelists, I would like for you to begin our conversation thinking about how you bring your voice, your skill, and expertise to family engagement, health, wellness, and student voice. And we'll start with Dr. Pate.
Hello again. I serve as the community superintendent for Brownsville for District 23. Under my leadership, I supervise and support 23 schools and an estimate of a little under 8,000 students and their families in the Brownsville Ocean Hill community. This is my 6th year serving the community, 4 as a superintendent and 2 as the deputy superintendent under our former superintendent, Dr. Maharaj. So, what is it that I do that really cross the boundaries of all of those different kind of agencies, if you will? First and foremost, it's being available to engage in the conversation. And when I say engage in the conversation is broad, and it really speaks to whatever the needs of the community are. I really see my role as a servant leader, which is to explore opportunities that may be out there to support the community. Within my district office, I have formed a really powerful team that I'm proud of that is really comprised of some Brownsville natives, people who really know and understand the community. I was born and raised in Bedford-Stuyvesant, which I like to say is the cousin of Brownsville. Out here in the streets, right? This is where, yes. So out here, growing up, I'm very familiar with Brownsville. I have lots of family who live between Brownsville and Bedford-Stuyvesant. So what I've come to know is that the best way to assist is to make yourself available. The skill set that I bring is really one as a people person, but also as a maven for instructional leadership. It's what I'm passionate about. It's what I'm committed to. And I believe that when we strengthen our schools, we make the difference for children. With education, the boundaries are unlimitless. And part of that component is the way in which we facilitate opportunities for their families, right? So in order to make that bridge, which I call the bridge between home and school, it's because we're servicing on both ends, right? So we're not only supporting the academic exposure and achievement of students, but we're also creating enrichment opportunities for families. And I do that in our Parent Resource Center that's located on Park Place. And at that center, we embody opportunities for career advancement and also health and wellness supports. So that is just kind of the tip of the iceberg around the work that I do. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Adrienne Austin, Acting Deputy Chancellor of the Division of Community Empowerment, Partnerships, and Communications. And the thrust of the work that I do and the work that gives me the most passion is the work that I do with families through family empowerment. So one of the things as Chancellor Deputy came on board was to change the name of the office, one of the offices I oversee, which is the Office of Family and Community Engagement. And there was a language change from engagement. Engagement is just, I'm sitting down at a table and we're engaging one another in a conversation, to empowerment. And the reason behind that change and what excites me about this work is that we have the ability to reach out to parents to tap into their power to be effective advocates for children. So that is being effective advocates at their school, to encourage parents to get involved with school leadership teams, to work with principals to help develop the plans and the goals for their schools. It's encouraging parents to get involved with PTAs, which are fundraising vehicles and other vehicles for participation in schools to make sure there are enrichment activities and programs, extracurricular activities at schools. And then to encourage parents to step up if they're interested in district advocacy. So getting involved with community education councils, running for elected positions there, being able to advocate for all of the students within districts and through that vehicle, working with their superintendent like Dr. Pate in the district leadership team, which is about planning for the district and figuring out how you're going to move the needle on all of the schools within the district. So it's really encouraging parents to get informed about all of the different avenues for involvement and advocacy, because there's a lot of spaces for parents to make a difference, not only in the life of their own children, but in the lives of children within their schools and children in their districts, and to partner with the DOE. One of the greatest forms of accountability for us as an agency is through our parent advocacy. So there are all these opportunities for parents to say to us as the DOE, here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's what we need you to do. And if the parents are not in those power spaces, making those sorts of arguments to us or telling us what they need us to do, it becomes very difficult for us to be responsive and to know what direction we're supposed to go, other than sort of a top-down approach. So that's the thrust of what I'm doing. It's what excites me the most, and so I'm glad to be here interacting with you all in this forum to get your feedback and answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm Rajendra Ramoon Maharaj. I'm the third vice president for the Borough of Brooklyn, the greatest borough in the world. I'm also the Arts and Equity Chair. I think it's really important when we start talking to share a little bit about how we got to be sitting in front of you today.
Yes.
So, and Happy Black History Month, which is
Yes.
every month, but Happy Black History Month. So I grew up in a single parent home. My father's Trinidadian, my mother's Bahamian. My dad was a Rolling Stone, so he left, and my mother had to raise me and my brothers and sisters. And the two things she always asked was faith in God and get an education. Those were the binding forces from this woman, and we were first generation. I recently said in an interview that growing up in Long Island, it occurred to me recently that I did not have one African American teacher at all in my 12 years of education, kindergarten to 12th grade. When I went to St. John's University, I did not have one African American professor. When I went to Brooklyn College to get my master's, I had my first. And so I think that there's something that really shapes us as human beings when we see ourselves reflected in classrooms and see ourselves reflected on stages and on television or pulpits that remind us of our greatness. I am in the NAACP because of one single reason. 1957, Little Rock, Arkansas, 9 black kids called the Little Rock Nine changed the course of our country and changed the course of my career. 15 years ago, I walked into Central High School and started a journey of bringing their story to Off-Broadway, which I did last year. And in the journey of that, learning about what a 14, 15, 16-year-old did in changing the trajectory of our country, and everyone in this room making it possible for us to sit in a room like this, along with Daisy Bates and Elsie Bates and Thurgood Marshall and Dr. King. What the NAACP did, it affected me profoundly. So I'm here today because I want to encourage the young folks who come from single parent homes, who have dreams of being an artist, whatever that might be in the performing arts, painting, dance, choreography, to see the arts, which I know many are cut from your schools, as a place where you can live your full potential. I think the arts covers so many different aspects of who we become in society. And it's not just about performing on stage, it's board of directors and managing directors and all different types of people that really shape our narrative. And as we look to the future, we look to each of you and the pride that you should have of being brown, black, and being from Brooklyn. Those are always the 3 B's I always lead with when I meet people. Brown, black, Brooklyn. Because we were not supposed to be here.
That's right.
And we are still here. We are still giving. And in these very strange political times, it's more important than ever, as Dr. Maya Angelou says, that we are present, not just in thought, but in mind, in action, and in education. So I wanted to be here. I just got back from Louisiana. I was there for 6 weeks. And I wanted to be here today because it's really important, especially to the young people. I see a lot of young black men here who made the time to not be in the cold and hanging out, but come to this conversation to know that in you, I don't only see myself, but I see the next mayor sitting next to us, right there. And all these amazing queens who are leading the charge. And I say to you, we see you, and our eyes are on you, which is the prize. Thank you so much.
First, I want to really thank the educators in the room. Education is a calling, and you don't do it because you are going to become some multi-billionaire. You're going to do it because you really love children, and these women who are here at the table have committed their lives to inspiring and educating children. I just cannot say thank you. Thank you for that. So I want to broaden our scope in this conversation. We got it all wrong. And sometimes you can travel so far down the road that you stay on that road and there's an unwillingness to turn around and say we have to rebuild destruction. There's no reason we still educate with an agrarian calendar, 2 months off during the year, the brain drain, that is a big impact on us. There's no reason the Department of Education is feeding our children to deal with caloric consumption and not nutritional consumption.
Yes.
We're serving processed meat in school, type 1 carcinogen. We know it causes cancer, but we're serving it anyway. And then when I finally got the city to stop serving processed meat, they went to cheese sticks instead. There's no reason that our babies, particularly in Brownsville, East New York, South Jamaica, South Bronx, their primary meals take place in our schools. The Department of Health is fighting childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, childhood asthma, yet we're serving 960,000 meals a day to our babies that causes what? Childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, childhood asthma. There's no reason that our mothers, the first classroom is in the mother's womb.
Yes.
If that mother is not getting the nutritional value, that child can be born with cognitive issues, social-emotional intelligent issues. No one is connecting the dot, and that's why we're starting our 0 to 3 program. We're having doulas come and visit mothers and talk to them about nutrition, talking to their babies, talking to them about the empowerment of actually taking care of that child inside the womb, having a dad part of that, talking about breastfeeding, what it does for a child, how important it is to build their immune system, not doing having your babies not go through your birth canal so you can inoculate them with the microbiomes that is needed to make sure that child is healthy. If we don't have a real conversation, we have to blow up the model that's in place because it's a fake model and it's not producing young people that are going to turn into productive adults in the future. And no one is really willing to engage in that conversation because we have to acknowledge we went so far down the road and now we have to go back and rebuild the process. The amount of brain drain that happens when our babies are off for 2 months over the summer and then they start back up, they lose so much ground in comparison to their affluent counterparts that are not sitting in front of the TV every day and bouncing the ball on a basketball court. You will never catch up. We're never going to catch up. In order to close the achievement gap, we have to start where the gap starts to depart, and that is at the beginning. And if anyone is not 3K and pre-K is good, but the horse is already out of the barn. 80% of a child's brain develops between 0 and 2-year-olds, the neuron growth. You'll never catch up if you don't deal in that time period. We have to be bold enough to talk about it. And the reason we're not bold enough to talk about it, let me tell you this. If white children were failing at the rate of black and brown boys, there'll be riots in the street.
Yes.
We have accepted the fact that black and brown boys, for the most part, are not able to learn. We have accepted that. They're level 1s, not only in Brownsville, they're level 1s in the south side of Chicago, Compton, Liberty City, South Jamaica, Queens, all over the globe. Black and brown boys are the level 1s in education, and we've built in a system that believe that either we have a defect that we can't learn, or the DOE hasn't figured out how to teach us, or no one gives a darn. We're far better than the productivity that we're producing in the Department of Education across the country, not only here in New York. And it is not an indictment on these proud, strong, rich educators. It's an indictment on the system that really, in fact, don't believe our children can learn. And we build systems around that like to believe. And so what we need to do, we need to feed our children healthy. We need to connect our mothers from the beginning. The Department of Health should be part of the food that's fed into our children. Pediatricians should connect with the Department of Health. The Department of Education should get out of the business of buying food. They know nothing about buying food. The food that we purchase and serve our children in school, that is part of their mind development, that's connected to the nutritional value of how your mind develops, that needs to be taught. Every teacher should be part of their professional development, should be how does a brain retain information and how does a brain comprehend and grow. Every teacher should do that. When I talk to my educators and start talking about synaptic connections and neurons and all of this information, they say, what the hell are you talking about? How do you start? Think about this for a moment. Psychiatrists were the only doctors that never looked at the organ they were trying to fix. Think about that. Educators are the only professionals that is not looking at the organ they're trying to shape and develop. How do you not know how brain retains information? How do you not know that between 0 to 3 you get 80% of the neuron growth? How do you not know what synaptic connections are? How do you not know this tool that we're using? This is not a magic tool that developed on its own.
Yes.
That is what we need to do if we want to have a real look at education and not just have a cosmetic change. That is the purpose. We must, not only that, something that we do, that I did last year. I sent away a group of educators to learn meditation, yoga, and mindfulness. Every day our children should start their day with meditation. By the time these babies get to school, they already experienced 11 people shot at Brownsville Day. Who's healing their mind? We want them to multiply and divide, and they said, who's going to deal with that? I'm divided. Who's going to deal with the domestic violence I experienced at home? Who's going to deal with what I went through when I came to school and I couldn't get the grocery store, the bodega, to put the money in my hand and followed me around the store? The cops stopped and frisked me while I was on my way here. I lost a loved one to gang violence. Who's going to deal with me? Our babies can't learn if we don't first heal them mentally, and we need to have those avenues of allowing them to be healed mentally so they can go and learn academically. You can't have a broken child learn academics. We need to start healing them from within. And I know I said a lot, but
Yes,
you know,
yes, thank you.
I want to drop the mic.
Yes, please.
So first I want to say thank you to the NAACP and to the educators in the room, and offer my apologies for being late, but I don't know if you know that today we have our stated meeting at the New York City Council, and what we do at that stated meeting is we vote on important bills that are important to our young people, important to our families, and I'm also part of the budget negotiation team, and we get ready to go into budget season. And in the City Council, you don't even use the bathroom during budget season for fear that somebody might eat your piece of cornbread. So I'm not into people eating my piece of cornbread, so I stay to the end. But nobody wants to follow the future mayor of the city of New York. I'm gonna do the best I can. I think that what the future mayor said is all true, except it's a little bit more nefarious than he's even saying. When I realized many years ago that the SHOT report said that they count the amount of beds in the prison system that are needed by the test scores of our third graders, I knew that it was a crisis from the moment I heard that. Because the system is working the way they designed for it to work. Yeah. Let's be clear, it ain't a broken system.
Yes.
It's working exactly how they intended for it to work. And when you think about the revenue generated from the undereducation of black boys, you'll understand that they're doing exactly what they intend to do to us and for us. What we try to structure, and I'm never sure whether I'm invited here because of my acumen around education or the fact that I'm a parent of 6 kids. But I have 4 boys and 2 girls. And I've had a child in every facet of the Department of Education school system. That means I've had a child that got a GED when GEDs were able to be gotten. And he got his GED at 16 years old because the school system was not available to him. And he would go and get in trouble and be looking out the window just like his father. And instead of them putting him into a gifted and talented program, they said that he was a troubled child. So it was best, he took the GED test at 16 and passed on the first time. So what does that tell you about what he was able to do if they had spent the time trying to educate him in CEC 16? No disrespect to CEC 16. So I've had a child that got his GED. I've had a child in gifted and talented. I have a child with an IEP, and I've had 3 children that have been a part of charter. So I've gotten to see this holistically, and what I know is that we need to be concentrating on everything from gifted and talented to CTE and everything in between. Right? So they trick us by having us focus on one thing at a time. That's ridiculous. So I thought everybody knows one of my most famous fights is to bring gifted and talented programs back to minority communities. The reason that was important because the same 7 zip codes that populate the upstate prison system, when I took office, they didn't have any gifted and talented programs. I don't think that's an accident. Listen to what I'm saying. There are 7 zip codes that are responsible for the population or the most amount of population of the upstate prison system. So that's Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, South Jamaica, Queens, South Bronx. But there are only 7 zip codes that really you can look at. And those are our zip codes, I'm clear on that. It was ironic that in those very same zip codes, under a prior administration, they had centralized the gifted and talented system, and it removed the ability for local input into the gifted and talented, and so all of the gifted and talented programs in those 7 zip codes dried up. That meant in Bed-Stuy and CEC 16, when I took over, when I got elected, there were no gifted and talented programs. So does that mean we didn't have no gifted and talented students? Certainly not. But they were finding themselves and their families not with the access. So part of this is about access. So again, I apologize for being late. I know we're going to get into the panel, people just introduce it, but I'm just saying to you that if we don't concentrate on the whole spectrum, everything from gifted and talented to CTE, how many people who are homeowners here have had to call a plumber or an electrician? With all the development going on in Brooklyn, why aren't our young people having a pipeline directly to those jobs and the trades that are doing those jobs? That's crazy. So this line and idea that we have to send all of our kids to Harvard is a ridiculous proposition. I know it's ridiculous when I have to call and pay $120 an hour for a plumber to come in. And he don't look like me.
Yes, yes.
And he finished high school barely, but was able to get into a system that allowed him to use his hands. Our black boys use their hands. My 4 sons, if you task them with something that requires that they use eye-hand coordination or their hands in general, they will succeed. So the idea that the only way that we can educate is through a particular methodology is a crazy thing, and we have to have more input from beginning to end and from gifted and talented to CTE.
Thank you. So I want to poke the bear here in a couple of ways. We are in Brownsville, where 52 years ago, this exact same conversation was taking place. The exact same conversation, where families were looking to bring something about that was different for their children within the community. The community boards, the community council, the repression of family voice was something that was rampant. I mean, if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to the podcast School Colors, I strongly recommend it. It is a stark reminder of where we've come from and actually where we still are. With that, and with understanding that in Brownsville, and I believe my numbers are correct, 1 in 5 children either live in temporary housing or are homeless. We have many folks who are underemployed, underskilled, and many families who are in crisis. Now, as we're sitting here talking, I don't want this just to be a conversation just between the panelists. I want the folks in the audience to also bring their questions, especially our young people. My daughter is in high school, my youngest is in high school, and her biggest issue is food. She does not eat the food at school. At home, I'm a gluten-free person, vegan person at home. But at school, she goes to school, and there are dairy products, and I know there are government regulations as to why dairy products are being served in the schools. And I would like us to talk about that and to unpack it. What are we going to do to change this? We've talked a lot. We know the problems. The problems are rampant, and they're the same. And like Councilmember Cornegy said, it's intentional. The system is working the way it was designed to work. How can we move forward from today, starting tomorrow, to make real changes for our families, for our communities, so that we can become 21st century people who are prepared for the 22nd century?
So I want to answer by saying, you know, the difference, not difference. I get the benefit of my predecessor being involved, the Honorable Dr. Alvan,
right,
in that struggle.
Yes.
So there is a continuation and a realistic expectation that I'm going to follow what he laid down. However, they moved the needle a little bit, and my daughter has told me that, Daddy, you got to skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is. We got to be ready to skate to where the puck is going to be. And we have to formulate our own agenda. So there's a huge argument out there that says the worst thing that ever happened to communities of color was integration. Because that came with all kind of ridiculous choices or the illusion of choice.
Yes.
Yes.
And we got off of our square, as we say around my way. We got off our square. And we got off of our agenda as a collective and a community, because now we got 17 different agendas. Like I said, some of it's around gifted and talented, some of it's around CTE, some of it's around inclusion, some of it's around regurgitating this idea that we have the most segregated system in the country. So everybody's talking and talking from a place of their own safety to some degree. But the collective idea that there is a mandate to move us forward doesn't seem as easy to nail down as it was then. As it was when you lived in, when I grew up in Bed-Stuy. You were there because you were relegated to be there, not because it was sexy. Unlike now, everybody wants to be there. If you found yourself in Bed-Stuy, you were there because you couldn't go nowhere, because you couldn't move to Bay Ridge or Mill Basin or all of these places that my friends live now that we couldn't go to when I was growing up, let alone buy a house there. So now we have people who are in those areas going, ooh, who baby is that? Like they don't have to necessarily, until a crisis happens to their child or to somebody that they know, which is very similar to the crisis that happens in East New York or Brownsville or in Bed-Stuy, because racism doesn't begin to not exist when you get out of these areas.
Correct.
So I just think that I'd like to begin to reinvent an agenda that's universal for Black people in education.
Yes.
And I think we have to get back to that first and foremost, because we got too many, we juggling a lot of balls at the same time. There's too many different agendas. So when I have educators who come into my office, I have an educational task force out of my office. And when they come in with all of these different agendas. Some of it's grandiose, some of it's, and I'm like, man, come on, we gotta get together on what our three principal ideals are. The three principles that we're gonna go to the next mayor with.
Okay.
The three principles that you're gonna go to the next borough president with. We don't, come on, y'all had to know that was coming. I'm not tricking nobody. Y'all had to know that was coming. And I held it as long as I wanted to. But a collective agenda as a community that we can take to our leaders and demand is what I'm asking.
So you say a 3-point universal?
3 to 5.
3 to 5?
3 to 5, not 15, because I get 15 when I ask for it. 3 to 5, that's realistic to deal with in the time span that an elected is in office.
Okay.
Now, again, I get a pass because I'm building on what my predecessor did.
Yes.
Right, so mine is a little different. Maybe I take a little bit more because I was well versed in the struggles around education by my predecessor. He sat me down before I ever ran, let alone won, so that I can understand what was built prior to me even trying to have leadership. Everybody don't get that opportunity. Our future mayor got that opportunity because he come out of Central Brooklyn. All of us that come out of Central Brooklyn don't get not to know how this goes. But it's not like that for the entire city, so I'm saying 3 to 5.
Dr. Pate?
So I think the way that we start to attack the crisis, because it's a crisis, is through exposure. So when you don't know what you should know, and you don't know what you don't know, it's difficult to jump in. I think that we have to purposefully and strategically create opportunities for people to have opportunity to sit at the tables that matter, right? So if you want to have a voice, that's one thing, right? But the opportunity for your voice to be heard is another thing.
Yes.
So I love that we have this opportunity, but I think that it's not enough. I think that we have to create, similarly to what we did in District 23, was to create, with the support of Goldie Muhammad, a square table talk. And that square table talk took people who some would say are nobodies and gave them a seat at the table, so the nobodies could then become somebodies to create and to do extraordinary things. And the extraordinary things is really speaking from the field. Like, we're in the trenches, right? I'm in Brownsville every day. I'm in the trenches. So I can tell you what it is that we need, which is very different than someone who's not in the trenches assuming that they know what the community needs. Yeah. So I think that we have to create these opportunities where we can be at the table and then utilize our voice, as it has been done before historically, to make a little bit of noise. So for me, that's how it happens, and that's the way that we start to shift the pendulum just a little bit, right? By showing up and showing out in a way that our voices and concerns can be heard, and be unapologetic about that.
And I think that it's also important to remember, and I'm going to speak for I'm not a politician, I'm an artist and an activist, but from my experience, those moments when my mom came home alone and tired, working 2 jobs and not knowing, how to make ends meet, if there was a support system for her, and in her being supported, giving me more encouragement to be excited about my education, that would have made a big difference. I think there is a gap in how we can encourage and support parents who are struggling, who might not come, this might be their first generation, their child in school, to encourage them about the excitement of education as well. Because if the parent is excited, the child will be excited. And I believe that. It's like, my mother used to say, your father's this and your father's that. And now I say to my mom, when you said that, you disrespected me because I come from him. And I'm half of him. So I think that it's really important for us to remember that yes, we can put all the money we want into the kids, but we also want to excite and engage the parents, because the parents are the first teacher, as was discussed earlier. And so we want to encourage that. And I want to also just take this moment to have my president of the NAACP, the greatest civil rights organization, speak for a few moments. Please welcome Eljoy Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, President, council members. I want to thank you so very much. I apologize for the delay. On my calendar was a different address, and so I was early there, and then ended up being late here. So I was by myself. But I want to commend particularly our education committee who is doing these conversations ongoing, because quite frankly, people are used to now having one-off events, and we come to events and everybody will talk about the issue passionately for an hour or two, and then continue on with their lives after that, maybe if they post something after that. But the reason they are continuing these conversations is because we have, from an education standpoint, a big nut to crack in terms of making sure that this public system and that it is developed and implemented correctly, particularly for children of African descent, particularly in a city like New York City, where majority of the children are of African descent that are in the school system. But then there's also our responsibility as our community. And quite frankly, we are used to now saying what schools ought to do and what teachers ought to do and what everybody else ought to do for our kids, and what system needs to be in place in the school system, and then relinquishing the responsibility that we additionally have to make sure that we have those supplemental programs, experiences, teachers, family support systems for what the schools aren't teaching or are not providing in the schoolhouse, as my grandmother still calls it, the schoolhouse. And so, for as I've described to our leadership, to our executive board, is talking about not only demanding our equity and fair share from an education standpoint in terms of what is supposed to be provided as citizens, as residents of New York City and of government, but then also help being solutionaries and figuring out what we need to do to also provide support for our children and our families. If we know that the school system is not providing adequate history of our people, why would you relinquish that information and that responsibility to an institution you know is not equipped to do so?
Yes. Yes. So, yes.
I wanted to respond. I'm the
Can you
CEO.
introduce yourself, please? Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Emery Empor Jr. I'm the CEO of EM Arts, which is a community-based organization. It took me 6 months to get an appointment with your office, and when I was able to get an appointment, I actually was able to see you. It was a nice tour, and I responded 3 separate times after that, trying to actually speak with you. And I've spoken with you personally at 2 different events, and I was introduced to you by a principal of one school that we work with, and I was introduced to you before that because I was a speaker at Professor Duncan when he passed. I was one of his disciples, so I was able to speak on that panel. I spoke with you briefly. I went to your office. I was there with the CEO of Calabar Imports, and I spoke to 2 people. One of them was the head of the Small Business Association, and the other one was the head of the Arts Council. And the reason I went to your office at that time was because we had 50 teaching artists that we had in the field who were working at various schools in District 19, 16, and 23, which we've had the blessing of being able to do.
Yes.
And we got no joy. And my thing is this: I'm a very practical human being. Brownsville Academy has a meditation room. They're doing marvelous things. Mont Hall is putting in a meditation room, which I'm consulting on helping them do that. I have been involved in health and fitness for 40 years. I have been one of the first personal trainers in the United States of America, and I helped with the expansion of health and fitness in Switzerland and Germany. And most of these institutions that you see have my footprint in them someplace. And I came out of training the ultra-rich to work in my community because I saw the disparity, and it makes me sick. And I grew up in Bed-Stuy, do or die, back before we had lattes and dogs that you could pump. So it pisses me off, and two things piss me off. One, there are educators doing fantastic things. I walk into some of these schools in Brownsville, and it blows my mind how much they're doing with so little. That's the first thing. My mandate was to help the teachers stay healthy. I have never seen pathologies in a group like that. And I've worked on every level. And I'm very, very aware of the neuroscience and the development of human being, developmental movement, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't matter if kids are off 2 months in the summer. That's not what's the problem with our educational system. The problem is they're being relegated to that system on purpose, as you so eloquently said. I've worked with charter schools, some of which I can't believe what they're doing to the children, and others I say, my God, it's a miracle what you're doing. A lot of it's individualized from the principal down because they're the chief. They determine what happens in their schools. They're like little fiefdoms. So the point I'm trying to make is how do we get some practical assistance today? I have people in the field right now. We need to get in more schools right now. We're working in schools right now. We have our MWBE. We have our MTAC, which is a multitask award contract from the Department of Education for 5 years for health and fitness in the schools. I literally physically go to schools every other day to try to expand our program. We've been working with the Department of Health for 3 years, and we got maximum per year $5,000 to do PDs for wellness for teachers. That's absurd. We're talking about 3 districts, and we get $5 grand to be able to go in and do practical work with teachers. And I'm talking about comprehensive work. I'm talking about the problems they have with chronic pain. I'm talking about the problems they have with atrophy or doing too much. I'm talking about the problems they have with stress-related disorders. I'm talking about the problems they have related to thinking that a Welch's snack is something that's good for them. And so you're looking at and talking to a solution because we're actually working with. So how can we do more? How can we get access to more institutions today, tomorrow?
A couple of things, brother. One, I gave a whole series of things that I pointed out, and being off 2 months is one of those things, and I disagree with you because the science says that is an impact on education. And it's not the only thing. I gave you a series of things as well as nutrition. Second, Brooklyn is the 3rd largest city in America. I get 50 requests a day to meet with me, 250 a week, over 1,000 in a 2-month period. When you come in and you reach out to me, I try to put you in place with the staff that deals with it. No one gave you a tour. If they did, you need to give me that name. They should have sat down with you. They should have listened to what you had to say. I get every request. I read over it personally, and I assign it to the person in the office that deals with a specific topic. I have a person on my staff that deals with education. My first thing is to deal with the crises in the borough. Any citizens in this borough that states they want to see the borough president because they're dealing with a crisis, they meet with me. I met with 9 people today as I run this borough. This is the 3rd largest city in America. And you're not the only one that has great ideas on around how to deal with these very real issues. I put $150 million in our schools. I put $200,000 to send educators away to learn what you just articulated. I got the city to stop serving processed meat in our schools. I put in place in this borough the first vegetarian meal to move them into a vegan meal. I know what we need to be doing in these schools. And you talk to the educators in this borough, they tell you they have never had a better friend around education than Eric Adams. I started the CTE program at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, $5 million to start that school there. The programs we're doing are amazing. Now, I'm in the Borough Hall 7 days a week. 6 a.m., I'm not like the mayor. 6 a.m., I'm in the gym. 7 o'clock, I'm meeting with people 7 days a week. If I couldn't meet with you through Monday to Friday, I'm ready to meet with you on Sunday. But because we meet, it doesn't say it's a guarantee that we can get that budget that comes from the school. I don't control that budget. I control my budget. And I would love to hear your program, but don't take it as a disrespect because my education person met with you. Take it as a disrespect if I don't have someone to meet with you.
Well said.
Other question?
Take a moment to say Okay, if you have a question, please do come to the mic so that the entire room is privy to what it is you have to say. We do want to hear your questions. We want you to ask them. We want you to get an answer. If you have a question and you don't want to come to the mic, please put it on an index card. We'll come around and collect it and we'll ask it for you. But your questions matter, so ask them.
One of the things that I will add, just you mentioned a few of the schools in Brownsville. So through the partnership with our borough president and also through the Department of Education, we've had an opportunity across my 23 schools to send our guidance counselors and our social workers first to the Kapala Institute, which is about mindfulness.
Yes, I've heard about that.
The entire district team, and inclusive of myself, has also gone to the Kapala Institute. And one of the things that I'm really proud about from last year to this year is that every school in Brownsville has either a mindfulness space or a mindfulness initiative that they are currently utilizing to support students through yoga, through mindful activities, through empowering words, and also through cognitive opportunities to kind of take meta moments, as we call it, in order to make healthier decisions. So throughout the district, that is something that I believe in myself, and also take the opportunity to reinforce with teachers and also with my building leaders. At the Parent Resource Center, we also have a mindfulness space. And we also, in addition to that, I do a monthly parent chat where it's an open agenda, but we start with a mindfulness activity. And it's an opportunity for families to come in and really understand the way in which, right? I was just talking to someone the other day and I told them that the distance between the brain and the heart is 12 inches. That's the size of a ruler, right? No matter how tall you are, at best, if you're like an NBA player, 14 inches. But for everyone else who's standard height, right, it's 12 inches. What happens when we have incongruency, right? It's when there's a disconnect between mind, body, and spirit. And in order to get people on the road and in the direction to make sensible, sound, solid decisions, not just for children, but for themselves.
Yes.
It's about creating opportunities for congruence. How do we do that? We do that through agencies such as yours, but we also do it by partnering really strong with advocates, such as the borough president, such as our current chancellor, who is working to offer resources to Brownsville, which historically has been neglected.
Yes.
And this year alone, we have a record high of funding that has come into the Brownsville community to afford schools with opportunities that we haven't had in the future. And just as the voice, right, for Brownsville, I have to shout that out.
Yes.
So that it is known in the community that the Resource Center is free. There is no charge for any activity that happens at the Family Resource Center, and I'm gonna make my commercial pitch right now.
Yes.
Next month we will be opening the first lactation space for Brownsville, the community. And that is, it started in partnership with Brooklyn Basics, even though I know we're not calling it Brooklyn Basics right now, but it started in partnership with that through the borough president's office, and we've received grants and funding, and the Department of Ed has really championed for me to open this space. So we'll be ribbon cutting for that, and that's gonna change the game.
Yes.
Because statistically, if we start to breastfeed babies
That's right.
from birth,
That's right.
we statistically make a difference in their lifespan
Yes.
and also their cognitive ability
Yes.
to later, right, 3K, digest the information that we're offering for them. So I'm a mother, I'm a breastfeeder, I'm a brown woman who breastfeeds. I'm very proud of that. So to open that space and that facility, that's my other way of changing the game.
Yes.
Through education and opportunity. So I'm gonna get over my soapbox.
And I just want to touch on it just for a moment, because because I don't think people really know what these black and brown educators are doing.
Yes.
You know, they're not just going, they've stepped outside of the DOE.
Yes.
They said, we're not allowing the DOE to determine what happens to these children. After years and years of watching the failure, a group of black and brown educators from the superintendent of Brooklyn North, superintendent of Brooklyn South, they came into me and said, they said the DOE is not willing to give us the money to send us away so that we can give these children the meditation, the yoga. We said, you know what, if they're not going to do it, we're going to do it. They said, Eric, that's why we came to see you. You get it. They came to me and stated that we need to do CTE program. A group of black principals came and said, we need CTE program and we need the money to open the programs at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We gave them the $5 million to do so. The teachers came to me and said, we don't have the technology in our school that we wrote the $150 million. This brother here, we got together to start and making sure that every governmental agency has a lactation room. This is our legislation. You know, so folks say we're not talking about it, we're being about it. Yes. And when you look at our legislative agenda, our capital allocation, the programs we implemented have become citywide programs. My program at Bellevue Hospital, first of its kind in America, that's disease reversal. We've never had a disease reversal program in any hospital in America. The first of its kind in America, 800 people on the waiting list, 173 people are going through the program, getting off their drugs for diabetes, heart disease, reversing conditions in America. Listen, we're changing the game. Yes. And these sisters, what they're talking about, when you look at these sisters who are educators and brothers who are educators, if you go into them and visit some of their locations and see what they're doing, they have changed the game of education. And that's why I started out my comments by saying thank you for what you're doing, because it's profound. They're not allowing just the system to control our children. And what they're doing now is going to change completely when I'm the mayor, because they're going to get to support me.
I want to just add, because the brother said that he wanted to be real practical. So part of the practical thing is that, and if you don't know this, some people are going to be mad, but whatever. As council members, every year we get to allocate $5 million in capital money and $500,000 in discretionary money. And so somebody like me who has the only LSMW working in their office, I have the only licensed mental health social worker in my office as a liaison to the educators. And we constantly have conversations with our educators about what they need financially and how we can provide that through Reso A funding or whatever. So we literally are saying, what do you want? How can we get it? There are several problems even with that. We've put in, because the request is always the same if they're not innovative. If they're not innovative, the request is for carts with laptops. The request is for like real stuff that doesn't really work when you get it all together. You spend a lot of money on it, but it don't really work. It ain't healing nobody. It looks good, I guess, on some form somewhere that you got this equipment. But most of the time when we get the equipment, the wiring in the building isn't even up to the standard to meet it. So you're asking for stuff. So we've gotten our educators to understand what they really need. Don't get excited about what they got on the Upper West Side. What do your kids really need for a day-to-day operation? And then we have this new thing where we take $1 million and let you vote on it, what you need. So you don't even got to tell me. Y'all can get together, and I'm sure that Alika's doing that over here as well. And really get your needs met.
I'm the only borough president.
And the only, of course, my future mayor, borough president. Thanks for keeping that seat warm for me. It's doing exactly that, which is giving you the power that you need, right? So there's many ways to do this, but from a practical standpoint, the partnership with your electeds, especially around their funding, knowing what their funding is, knowing when it comes out, we right in budget season right now. And so we're going out and talking to our educators and saying, yo, where's your list? Where's the list? Where's the list? What do you want?
I know, Councilmember Cornegy, you have to leave shortly, but you want to give some closing statements, so thank you so much for being here.
That money will be my closing statement.
Okay.
How to get that money.
Yes.
So in the words of, Denzel was like, I'm gonna get this gun, and then I'm gonna get this money. No guns, but there's a way to get the money that you need. Well, the borough president, we're not gonna talk about his gun comments, but the reality is there are people who are passionate and willing to create a pathway for you to get what you need. So you got allies now, and I'm not just talking about me and Eric. There are some black and brown colleagues that I have that are going the extra mile, and they're stepping out of the city council and stepping out of the assembly and doing what's never been done before to allocate it. I just want to say that my leaving now is not a testament to me not wanting to be engaged in this conversation. I'm engaged in it whenever you find me. Most of you will catch me at Food Town, at Blink, and we'll have no area about asking me about these things, or at church at the offering plate,
Or calling you because.
or calling me at 7 o'clock in the morning, your NAACP president. So I'm accessible, I'm 7 feet tall, I can't hide, even if I wanted to. But I need to let you know that there are people who are willing to do this work along with you, who recognize how tirelessly you work in the fields to get this done, and who are willing to meet you at least halfway, if not more. Thank you.
So before we go for thank you, Councilman Cornegy, we want to hear from Adrienne Austin, LJ Williams, and then this young man has a question for.
We'll let him do his question.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Noah Lewis. I'm from Eagle Academy, I'm a senior. So far, my college process has been a little bit biased towards going to CUNY and SUNY schools. And that, I'm sorry. My college process has been biased towards CUNY and SUNY schools, leaving little room for me to branch out into other schools, like private schools like Howard, like historically black colleges.
Yes.
But, and not only that, at the moment I'm going to the Air Force, but I didn't have much help going into the Air Force from my school. So I wanted to know what outlets or what plans do we have to have an easier process for kids who either don't want to go to these CUNY and SUNY schools or want to branch out into other trades.
Great question. What school you attended?
Eagle Academy.
Okay, I don't know if many of you are aware of Eagle Academy, but it's an amazing school. David Banks, I allocated $3 million for Eagle Academy to do their Eagle model, the first of its kind, a great program. The numbers are impressive. You go to Eagle Brownsville?
Yes.
Numbers are impressive. And what I would like to do, I would like for you to partner with our office. Candace, Brianna's in the back. Brianna, raise your hand. Brianna's in the back. I would like for you to partner with her and come up with what that program should look like. How should we do it? Because you already went through it, you know what you're looking for, but we would love to partner with you and figure out how do we shape that program on what exactly it should look like, and this way we can get it right. Instead of we're trying to dictate to you, you should let us know this is what the pieces of that program should look like, and we would like to roll it out with you. Okay?
And thank you for your service. Air Force.
We're going to give comments.
Yes. So 2 things. Once I want to sort of address the issue that was just brought up by the young man. Every student should be exposed to every opportunity for colleges, local colleges, for public universities, for private universities, through their guidance counselor. Every school should have at least one guidance counselor that speaks directly with them in the 11th grade and the 12th grade. I know a lot of schools are organizing college trips so the students have an opportunity to tour different universities and make an informed decision. So I have so many questions just in follow-up about, what that process was like. Was there a guidance counselor? But that's what it's supposed to look like, and it sounds like the young man had a very different experience than that, and so I would just love to follow up and learn more, because that's not the way that it's supposed to work. It's supposed to work that you go to your guidance counselor, and your guidance counselor explores all of the options with you, both CUNY schools, SUNY schools, public universities in other states, private universities, HBCUs. So if that didn't happen, I just would like to learn more about that, because you didn't have the experience that we expect to happen for our high school seniors. And so want to follow up more. I wanted to address the issue specifically around MWBEs, because we've done a couple of things within the last couple of months We have now an MWBE director, a new position that was created specifically to look at how we can bring in more MWBEs. We are a $33 billion a year agency, which means we give a lot of money away in contracts, and we want to prioritize MWBE. So there's a specific position created within the last couple of months to look at that and to work with MWBEs to find those opportunities. The second thing that we've done is we've increased the cap on our MWBE contracts. We've done something different. So our procurement process is really complicated and very difficult.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and it's competitive, and it sets for MWBEs. It's very difficult because you're competing against sometimes businesses who have been getting these contracts for years and years and decades and decades. And how are they paying people? What are their subcontracts? All of those things. It's a difficult process. And so what we've done within the last, I think, month, the PEP voted through a regulation that changes the process for MWBEs. And I think there's a relaxed procurement process, I think up to about $500,000 specifically for MWBEs. So I want to get your information so I can connect you with this person who's now overseeing this process.
Appreciate that.
But yeah, it's with an acknowledgement that we have not done very well in this area. We want to be able to do better, and we want to be able to bring in MWBEs and support.
Appreciate that, because it took us over a year to get the status, because my grandparents were sharecroppers, and so they didn't have proof, because the only proof of them being American citizens was in a small church that burned down. So I literally had to get an affidavit from my mother that I was black.
Wow.
And it took over a year for them to accept all the paperwork, and then it cost roughly $20,000 to get the MTAC. And almost 2 years. I actually have the 3 copies sitting on my desk now, 267 pages in triplicate that they want with original signatures. So that was, they just make it so that, I call it barrier to entry.
Yes.
But I refuse,
By design.
I refuse to quit, because we have been doing good work, and I know that we can find that way. So any assistance from anybody on the panel would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
So I wanted to make the connection also, because there's always a connection. I don't know if anybody's brought up the census yet, but considering being president of the NAACP, I'm gonna bring it up. So when we're talking about the resources necessary for our schools, for other services in our community, the census is at the heart of the ability to be able to have the data to back up our argument on what our communities need. And there's by no accident that for Brooklyn and NAACP, Brownsville is one of those neighborhoods we're heavily invested in and continue to organize in as part of our census outreach that begins on March 12th. We actually began doing teach-ins and trainings with community over the summer, and actually have been gearing up for this for about 18 months. But there is a direct correlation between what services exist, what resources exist for our communities with filling out the census.
Yes.
And so if we have an undercount in our communities, if we are not counting, if we are not checking black to make sure that we are counted in our communities, those are numbers we then have to deal with for the next decade. And then we are again under-resourced in our community. So yes, it is great to have elected officials and advocates like the borough president and other council members who know and can see that there exists more people of color, black folks in Brownsville and East New York than what says on a paper, and they're providing extra resources on top of what is is given at a base level. But it is our responsibility to make sure that we show up in the census, because that is direct resources for our children's education.
Yes.
That is direct resources for the seniors in our community. That is direct resources for daycare, for all of those services that we know there is a desert, whether it's in Brownsville or other places in central Brooklyn. If we are not all committed to making sure that we show up and are counted, and whether it's the cousin that's living in the basement or the kids you now have in your house like me that was only supposed to stay there for a few weeks and now I just enrolled them in school, whatever it is, we need to count them to make sure that there is resources for them for the next 10 years.
Excellent. We have a question. Yes.
So hi, I'm Matthias Nixon. I go to Yale Academy, Brooklyn. Right now I'm doing a project on school reform and the disciplinary system.
What year are you in?
I'm in my senior year. My issue is even though we all do our best at being good students and whatnot, but from my point of view, it's it's a little debilitating to be a student who's for social reform and whatnot, and having to deal with student dissent myself, and I don't know how to speak on it, but being a person of LGBT, I get a lot of backlash sometimes, and just today I had to deal with slurs being hit back frontwards and backwards at me, but and whatever is being done is done, but it's like a gap putting a band-aid on it. So I'm trying to develop a reform project for my school so that I can when I leave my school, I want to leave it with leave my mark on there saying that I've changed the school in some way. So my question is how can they form a disciplinary system for students, even though when adults aren't really there in their life, I have to deal with people who but students whose parents come home late at night, but had to miss calls from the school stating that their student wasn't really doing well and whatnot. So when they come back the next day, they're still acting the same way. So I'm just trying to find out how can we get a connection to family engagement in schools so that we can connect with our students and how they become better to not just their family, but to other people as well.
Great question. Thank you.
Good question. I mean, I can, so my husband is also a high school teacher, and he brings this up a lot about that he has to go outside of sort of normal operations in order to engage with parents, and it could be for a number of different reasons. The child is living with other relatives, and so even though the parent's information is on there, the other relatives are sort of really, the disciplinarian is sort of that is not communicated, or the parents work at different hours, and so he's doing sometimes calls on Sundays or Saturdays in order to engage. In those instances, sometimes you have good administrators and good teachers that understand children and understand the dynamic and sort of go what people consider above and beyond. Teachers and administrators like my husband are it's not above and beyond. This is just what you have to do when you're caring for children. But you're right in that for the student themselves, it then becomes a handicap in terms of having the partnership that is supposed to happen between the teachers and your family in terms of moving forward. I think also in your question, you're asking that if you are a student that is trying to push reform in your school, of providing support or protection for you as you are trying to navigate that system as well. Is that really your goal?
Not just there's also happens with other people, so not just for me, but for other students as well,
right,
who are also coming up.
Right. And so that's where I think it's sort of the connection I talked about before of having outside entities like an NAACP, like student activism groups, who can provide that support and be able to help you as a student or maybe your parents to navigate that system. I know Tracy just recently, as our education chair, is facilitating the difficult conversations that students are having with their schools right now. We're doing that in 3 other schools right now, right? Yes. But the problem is, as you're mentioning, you don't know where to go. Right? And so there is that benefit of information of being able to arm students with, if you are having issues, if you are having problems, here are the resources that you can go to. And I know that there are, in school and resources but you're right in that how that is communicated to students to empower you right? So that you feel safe, so that you feel protected and supported is important. And I think you have, yes.
Yeah, we're both gonna take this. One, all students should feel safe in their school environments.
Absolutely.
A couple of weeks ago, I wanna say we had a Respect for All week, and part of the idea around that was to talk to students about what it means to be a victim of bullying, why it's not acceptable to see bullying in schools, and we have in every school a Respect for All liaison. The sole responsibility of that person, I don't want to say so, because the person probably has a million responsibilities if they're in school, but one of their main responsibilities is to work with students to make sure there's education on these pieces, education about our LGBTQ population and our students, and support for our students, and also around sexual harassment and making sure there's trainings and programs for students to educate students on sexual harassment, and then discrimination. And what you started to articulate sounded to me like an experience that you've had around being the victim of either bullying or discrimination. And we have pretty clear policies about what is supposed to happen when a student is a victim of bullying and discrimination. There's supposed to be an investigation. If you inform anyone who's a staff member at school, it's supposed to trigger an investigation. And so if I'm like I'm here again thinking I want to follow up with you and learn more about what happened and maybe what went wrong.
What's been happening,
Yeah,
it sounds like.
because there's a clear process, at least from a protocol standpoint. No student should be the victim of bullying or discrimination and not have someone in the school they can talk to, and then someone in the school who's following up to investigate whatever's happening and then take action. And the second piece that you're talking about seems to be about taking action and what's supposed to happen with the other child and the conversations with parents around follow-up. So I'm gonna turn that over to Dr. Pate.
So let me add to what you said. Every middle school up to high school has a minimum of 2 single shepherds who their sole responsibility is to really address what you are talking about. Similar to our deputy chancellor, there's this spirit of follow-up. The difference is I'm the superintendent, so when I leave this dais, I will be following up with my presence and a phone call today to really figure out where, based on what you're speaking about, where the ball may have dropped, so to speak, between the issues that you brought up, but also the issues around college selection that have been brought up. I will say, on behalf of Principal Meade, that the Eagle Network and Eagle as a whole really does pride themselves on knowing every student well, supporting every student aggressively, and also taking action when needed. So this comes as a little bit of a surprise to hear this, but I think that what is amazing about what you've shed light on is that it creates an opportunity for me as a superintendent to shore up some of the protocols and practices that are happening within your school, but also every school. So some of my principals are here in the audience, and they have given me the look because they know that basically means tomorrow there may be a conference call, right, Tracy? Yes. So that's why they're giving me the look. So you can be very sure that I tell people, if you want to be more aggressive, you want to be more added, you want to be more present than I am, then don't sleep.
But I do want to say this.
So
I do
we
want to
will
say,
address those
and I do want to say
concerns.
this, that I think it's remarkable the courage that
Yes.
your generation shows to stand. It was unimaginable for queer people less than 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, to stand in a room like this in this neighborhood and to own your queerness and own your story. And so, like James Baldwin said, to be born black and gay in America, that he hit the jackpot. Now you have to use your voice, as you did today, for change, and just continue to fight that. I know that at times you feel like you're a little island onto yourself as queer black men and women and trans in the world, but moments like this open the door for those who are in kindergarten, who are going to have a similar path, but will have it easier because you spoke up today. So continue to speak, because when we fight, we win.
Hi everyone, my name is DeMarcus Bell. I'm Matthias' educator, and he's a part of our live band. He's a phenomenal student. He's number 2 in his class. And he just actually had a performance at the Apollo yesterday.
Hey!
Give it up for that. He's also got a leadership and social justice class. So they're actively engaged around these issues. And I wanted to kind of get his question a bit more pointed, because I think we're also here to talk about family engagement.
Yes.
And I think, particularly for me also as an LGBT educator, I think the conversation is so much bigger than individual situations, though they need to be addressed, right? I'm wondering just, to bring up a dialogue about how we can begin to create a more communal conversation and engage with the community around LGBT issues, right? Because schools can only do so much work. Students bring things with them to the classroom every day.
So may I make an offering? As the Education Committee Chair, I'm putting us out here, Education Committee. I think that this is an opportunity, another branch for us to explore together. I'm glad you brought this up. And in partnership with the NAACP and with Rajendra and the Equity in Arts and Culture, we can begin having the conversation, because there's so much to tease out of what you brought up. And there needs to be a lot of time and thought in developing what this could look like. And so I'm making this offering for us to continue the conversation and to figure out how we can do this along with folks who are in with the Department of Education. But this should be, and with Dr. Pate and her team, figure out what is it that we can do to bring a community conversation about the things that we don't talk about.
Before you leave today, I'll give you my card.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is very broad. It's dealing with infrastructure. Brownsville reminds me of Bed-Stuy and other areas in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s where there wasn't the sanitation wasn't very good. We weren't getting the services. Getting here was hard.
Yes.
It was very hard. If you're using transportation, it's very hard. And I was looking at, you have to walk a lot here, I'm guessing, because you don't have that infrastructure. And that's something else that you need to get, because as this place gets bigger and as you get more and more into the 22nd century, as 21st century educators, you're going to need where people can come in and be able to come to your space and do what they need to do. And if they can't find you, or if it's hard, or the place is hard to find, that's a problem as well. And I think that's something else that we need to talk about, maybe a little bit along with the other stuff.
Yes. Infrastructure.
Yes, infrastructure.
I think that goes back to Eljoy's point about the census.
Yeah, I mean, because, the council member mentioned this before about you can have all of this new technology and that can be allocated to schools, but I remember a project, this was before Tracy was education chair, our previous education chairs ago, and we did this just anecdotal audit of going to schools and touring schools, and yeah, they had equipment, but they couldn't turn on the equipment and the air conditioner at the same time, or or the prongs of the electrical wouldn't allow. I mean, that's just a basic huge problem, and so it's not that our educators and our folks did not want to use the technology or incorporate it into their curriculum. Is I can't plug it in, right? And so that is an infrastructure problem. And just think about it. When is the last time we as a city built new schools in a mass way?
Well said.
When is the last time we did that? Right? That we looked at and then actually reimagined what the space of a school should look like and what it should include.
Yeah.
Right? For present day, right? And so the conversation about what needs to be. I grew up here in the city, going to school here. I remember that going to the dentist and going to the clinic, like in my junior high school, right? Like it was part of that, right?
Yes.
And so, like, thinking about, even as we get through this next census, and as we are continuing to advocate on behalf and with our educators in terms of what they need,
yes, they need resources within the building, but they also need the building to be better and to be a better partner for them to actually do their job.
If I can just say, we have a record investment in our capital planning. So we have a $17 billion investment in capital planning, and we're in the middle of the implementation of that plan. And so sort of going back to what I said in the beginning, community voice, parent voice is key to how that funding actually gets allocated. So to the degree that Dr. Pate is there with her CEC every month, there's a PEP every month, there's all these opportunities for the public to sort of raise your voices and the priorities that are around the district, what buildings need new infrastructure, what buildings need technological infrastructure, where there need to be renovations, and where there actually need to be new buildings and new classrooms. That's all a part of what that money is supposed to go to fund. And it's important that we have community voice in allocating that funding. And then since you mentioned Reimagine School, it's one of our initiatives.
Yes.
We actually
Segue.
Yes. We were very excited to be able to launch our Reimagine Schools initiative, which is exactly that, reimagining the way the schools look in New York City. This is a community-driven process. A number of communities across the city applied to be a part of that process, and it's literally community members, parents, community leaders at the table with the Department of Education, rethinking what these schools should look like and creating brand new schools with whatever it is that community decides is a priority for the community. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pate so she can talk a little bit about what that looks like on the ground.
Yes, so I'm excited about this, and I'm excited to be sitting with people who are involved in somewhat or some part of selection. I have 3 schools who have applied and who are at the second phase of the reimagine of their schools. So the Reimagine initiative is a perfect opportunity for my schools to really reinvent themselves in an innovative way and to partner with outside agencies to create the magic, if you will, for students. So I am, their videos are live and up, and many of them you can see on social media and on our website. That's 23K137, and that's Principal Rose, who just excited. She sits on the Ocean Hill side of Brownsville, so that creates like just a unique opportunity for bringing in students who would not always, cross. I like to go with the right side of Atlantic Avenue, right? Atlantic Avenue. We also have a new principal, Dr. Pembroke, who is applying for the grant as well. And we also have Miatheresa, who is another principal in, she actually is co-located in the Eagle School building. So these are just 3 schools that jumped on the opportunity, and they are just excited and they are ready. And it is my hope and my pitch right now that I believe that those 3 schools will move to the final round to be able to reimagine their schools and to create true innovation within Brownsville in a way that we haven't seen, so that it will in turn bolster enrollment throughout District 23. So
how much of a role does the kids play in that?
So
I know everyone was thinking, and I said it.
Yes, so
a lot of adults talking. But
yeah,
how much
so
does the kids actually?
each of the schools have they must have a student team that's a part of the Reimagine plan. But every school within Brownsville has a either a student advocacy team or they have a student government team. We just actually participated in the Department of Ed's civil justice component through Soapbox. It's something called Soapbox, where students get to advocate around a variety of issues on their soapbox. So it was a huge initiative, and we kind of took it and we ran with it to create our first annual soapbox within the district. And we're going to continue to do that. It's my hope that we will have more students to participate in Soapbox. Thank you to Dr. Quarles, who hosted the Soapbox in her auditorium. So it was a great success. So thank you, Tracy.
So we have 3 folks who have questions. We want to give the remaining of our time that we are over to these 3 folks and really give our attention to these young people who are bravely, who showed up, number 1, and who are actually, and who actually are going to bring us their questions. Yes.
My name is Miatheresa. I go to Eagle Academy. I'm in 11th grade. My question is like. My question is basically, you know how the community we live in is mostly crime. So like for the kids that's going down the wrong path, what are you really doing to help them drop out of school? What are you helping them to get back into education to make sure that they know it's a different route for them to take?
You want to have the other ones ask?
Okay, yeah, so that's one question. The first question is, how do we help people get back on track? Is that correct? Who are crime? Yes. Second question.
Okay, so my name is Jalil and I go to Eagle Academy. I'm in 10th grade. So when I was in 6th grade, I used to get bullied a lot. So my question is like, how do we help the kids that's get bullied or that's not like that popular? How do we help them feel comfortable to be in school?
Thank you. Bullying. Yes. One more question.
Hi. My name is Jaden, East New York. I go to high school of art and design in Manhattan. I'm a senior, and I guess my main question is, not necessarily a question, but I do have something to say. That I've noticed, especially in my communities, that, you know, I'm a young artist, you know, I'm a writer as well, you know, and I guess I've been blessed enough to have all these outlets to express myself. And I always find that as a student, with how hectic our lives can be, that self-expression is really the thing that keeps us going and, you know, prevents us from wanting to give up and like, oh, school probably isn't for me, you know, because I can't find that release. And I'm getting off topic. I always thought that one great way to help people discover, especially young people, what they want to do is more community events.
Yes.
And more community events. And one idea that I've recently had is I've noticed that a lot of these buildings outside, you know, the neighborhoods that we live in and the things we see every day, you know, they're not in the best condition. And I always found it detrimental to people's mindsets that if they believe that they're in a bad place, that they'll continue to have a bad mindset about who they are and what they can accomplish. And so I really think it's a good idea to bring people together and to, you know, instead of having all this, you know, just canvases for only us to see, you know, we have these huge canvases, these walls here, you know, to throw up our history or our beliefs and what we want to put out into the world. And then also, you know, to also bring young people out to try new things. Out here in East New York, I love to skateboard, you know, but my whole life everyone's like, oh, you tall, go play basketball, garbage at basketball. You know, smaller things, small little things that can make a huge difference, like building a skate park, for example, so I don't have to go all the way to Manhattan just to do what I like to do. Yeah, that's what it is.
Thank you for that.
Well, I want to say, could we recruit all these
Yes,
people? Our youth council, please. Can we recruit them? And I would just say as an artist that the most important art often comes from the most dark places.
Yes.
Or perceived dark places.
Yes.
And I would encourage you to create here in your own community your art circle, if it's playwrights, if it's acting. You know, this is such a rich history and culture, and we think that we have to go to 42nd Street and 8th Avenue to see a Broadway show. Broadway happens every day here.
Yes.
Life happens every day here.
Yes.
There's not an original idea that came from America that they didn't take from black and brown people in the arts. So to know you already know your crown, you're wearing a lion. You know, like to know that like you have to continue to find your community and create it. You started tonight. I'm sure there are other young artists in here. There are old artists who are writers who will be like, hey, you could try this, think about this, come to this meeting. So just, I think it starts with that, for sure. And then I would just say about bullying, I've been bullied my whole life. And that's what gave me my spine. And so it sucks, it's awful. We as adults sometimes don't understand, but you're not alone. And so continue to reach out to your community, and if not, you can speak to those adults who are your allies, who have walked the walk with you. And then in terms of crime, I have a nephew who's sitting right now in prison who made some really bad mistakes because his family went through a divorce, he got involved with drugs. And I tell him every day, we have to find ways. We failed you now because you're in jail. We're trying to get you out. How do we mind the gap? We should have been more involved. And not just oh, here's your dinner, go to a movie, get new Nikes, but hey, come to an NAACP meeting. What are you doing in school? Is it Black History Month? Are there plays going on? Are you performing? Other ways of looking at it as Black men, not just the women who are still here, the other Black men left, but but to encourage each other. And so, I wanted to offer that to you as the guy the old man on the panel still.
So, something I'd like to say, I appreciate the three of you bringing these important, relevant topics, and something that I'm doing through my organization, the Sankofa Global Project, because my daughter, who's also a teenager, she went to Pride March back in June of last year, and she came home and she talked about how great it was, because her best friend has 2 dads, and she wanted to be supportive, and she kept going on and on how amazing it was, how beautiful it was. Long story short, we've designed a Black Love March for Brownsville. And I would love for you, the three of you, if you are interested, to join our committee as we design this along with Alika Ampry-Samuel, with Latrice Walker, and just figuring out how do we bring some Black boy joy and Black girl magic right here in Brownsville, because it's already here. We need to amplify it. And so I want to extend this invitation to you. And I want to, someone already said it before, about being a part of reigniting the youth council for the NAACP. Yes. Because we need your voices. We need you. You are our future. You are our present and you are our future. And we want to see you. Also we need your ideas. I mean, you're living, I've been in education for a really long time, longer than I want to admit. And I consider myself on the cutting edge of innovation, but I'm one person. You all are the innovators that are going to build the 22nd century. You are the ones that are going to redesign education in a way that we've never seen before. And so we need for you to, like today, you came, you showed up, to continue to show up and to be a part of these conversations.
I will say on our youth council, for those of you who are interested, we did just reorganize our youth council. It was just voted on at the national board level. So if you go to brooklynnaacp.org and sign up to our email list, you'll get the email of the reorganization meeting. The young people who are in NAACP Youth Council, adults don't tell y'all what to do. Young people elect their own president. They elect their own executive committee, and they decide what projects they're going to work on and what issues they want to work on. So it's a great way and a great opportunity to not only get civil rights training and advocacy training, but then to be able to immediately put it into use, because you have to decide who is the leadership among you, and then what issues and what activities you're actually going to work on. All we do is, y'all just give us a report and follow from there. So if you are interested in joining, or if you have children in your life who you want to join and is 17 and younger, go to brooklynnaacp.org, sign up on our email list, because that date of the reorganization meeting will be announced next week. And that's it. That's it.
Okay. Gentlemen, have a seat.
So on behalf of the NAACP Education Committee, I want to say thank you all for coming out and engaging in this conversation, this Fireside chat. To our panel, Thank you so much for your input. We will continue to talk with you, and we will continue along this line. To the young men, it's exciting to see you out. And it's more exciting to hear your voice. I want to say thank you for that. It's inspiring as well. It is beautiful. It is Black Boy Joy, and I hope I'll see you out at the next event as well. With that, please.
March 26th.
Yes, March 26th is our next Fireside chat. We invite you all back out. It will be here, same time.
Yes.
And please come with your questions, because this chat is for you.
Yes.
So we want you to come with your questions. If you're not comfortable to ask the questions, write them down. Somebody will ask it for you. But we want to have a conversation with the community. We had handouts for you. I hope everyone took. It's about parent engagement, involvement within the schools, what that should look like. If those activities aren't happening at your school, you need to speak with your school and get these things implemented. We have the sign-up sheet. We have your email so that we can stay in contact with you and let you know what the education committee is doing. Join the NAACP Brooklyn.